happy October! Welcome to Crime Dive. My name is Crystal Sky, and if you're anything like me, like at all, you find yourself drawn to true crime cases. As such, that's what I talk about. If you like true crime, and you also want to feel better about your makeup skills, because I don't know what the heck I'm doing, you should totally like, subscribe, and let's hang out together every Tuesday where I will take a deep dive look into a true crime case while slapping on the old clown paint. Like I said, happy October. I love October. I love Halloween. It's like my favorite season. I don't know how much you guys can tell. I probably did a little too much decoration for the small itty bitty space I have. But yeah, I tried to add some stuff here. So yeah, I don't know if you can see my little flickering lantern here. There's supposed to be a kitty on top of the pumpkin, but you can't really see it. But yeah, I added like some pumpkins and added a couple of stuff right here. And yeah, you can't really tell, but I added like some Halloween trim right here. Yeah, I can't really tell too much. Like I got like the web situation going on out there and added some little ornaments to my Halloween tree. But yeah, I just had so much fun. I love Halloween. I love it so much. I love the fall season. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just because, I don't know, like it's like all about, endings and stuff. Like I'm also a big fan of spring too, where new beginnings. So yeah, I don't know. Just very, very excited. I love this time of year. Also, yeah, so sorry for last week's video where I got the name of James's first victim, William Visseth. I kept calling him Michael by accident because I remember there was one newspaper article that actually mixed up the names of William and his cousin Michael. And yeah, apparently I did not update my notes when I found other articles that corrected that. So my bad, man. Like sometimes I try really hard to, cross all those T's and dot all those I's, and I still run into mistakes. And you guys have called me out on a few of them. So yeah, I totally appreciate that. Thank you. Also, yeah, I think I'm caught up on comments now. I'm so sorry about that, guys. I'm so sorry. Like I said, I am doing a lot of extra research right now because I have lots of stuff planned for the new year. So I'm trying to get a leg up on it. And man, I've just been putting my nose to the grindstone and just doing nothing but like research and editing. So sorry it took me a while to get to the comments. I am going to try to be better about, communication, just kind of being more social in general. I'm going to try to be on my social media more. I'm a very insular, introverted person. And honestly, social interactions, like even online ones, I gotta tell you, like they exhaust me. They like physically make me tired. And I don't know what's wrong with me. Like it's totally a me problem. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to try to be better about that. But yeah, thank you so much for commenting. I love when you comment. I love case suggestions. I've gotten so many. Thank you so much. Like, I almost feel like it's cheating almost because I feel like you guys are making my lists for me. But yeah, you guys have suggested some really, really cool ones, so I can't wait to get into them with you. All right, well, I guess enough blabbing about. Let's talk about today's case. Oh my god. Today's case. Yeah, as the title of the video suggests, yeah, we're talking about an evil witch today. Like, seriously, so like how in fairy tales, the stepparents, they're always like evil. You notice that? Like, I don't know what the heck is up with that. But yeah, today we will be talking about an actual like fairy tale stepmother come to life. Yeah, we're going to be talking about Kimberly Mangrum, all right? And this chick is trash, all right? She's a hag, all right? Like, we'll get into it and you will see. Disclaimer wise, nothing too graphic as far as true crime goes, you know what I mean? Like, we're still talking about murder, so of course there's going to be a little, like, graphicness and stuff, but yeah, nothing too gruesome, graphic, or anything like that. But yeah, this case will probably infuriate you and probably horrify you too. It horrified me when I heard about it. I was like, oh my god. All right, and without further ado, let's talk about Kimberly Mangrum, but we're not going to be starting with her, all right? We're actually going to start off with Leanne Mangrum, all right? She's the victim of today's case, so that's who we're going to start with first. So Leanne Mangrum was actually born Leanne Smith on November 19th, 1967. Her mother was Betty Clifton Wade, and her father was Garland Saunders Smith. Leanne had 3 sisters named Donna, Dana, and Cheryl. And she also had 2 brothers named Daryl and Jerry. Now, Leanne, she grew up in the Dickson County, Tennessee area. Now, I don't have a whole lot of information on Leanne's upbringing, her childhood, or like kind of any nitty-gritty details like that. Just a couple of quotes and descriptions from some family members that I'll share with you. So Leanne's older brother, Daryl, he said his sister was, quote, a young Christian woman who was not perfect. She always reminded me of Dolly Parton, the way she was always huggy, kissy, and so bubbly. Garland, Leanne's father, said he and his daughter shared a close relationship. Quote, we were close. Real close. Her sister, Donna, described her as very sweet. She said she was soft-spoken and someone who, quote, loved life and people. Yeah, Leanne was very much a people person. Leanne met her future husband, Terry Wayne Mangrum Sr., not long after high school. Terry had been born on June 2nd, 1967. Kind of like with Leanne, don't know a whole lot about Terry Sr. All I know is that his father was Larry Mangrum, and his family was from the Fairview, Tennessee area, and they actually operated a, marble company there. And Terry Sr. worked for his family business. Now again, don't have a lot of details about Leanne and Terry Sr.'s relationship. Not sure when exactly they met, just, that it was not long after high school. Don't know when they got married or anything like that, but I do know that, they did end up getting married and they ended up having 2 children together. A son they named Terry Wayne Mangrum Jr., and he was born August 24th, 1987. And their second child was a daughter they named Alicia. Do not have a birth date or birth year for her, just that I know that she was born sometime in the early 90s. Now, Leanne was described as a very caring, devoted, loving mother. She was described as just being a quintessential Southern girl who had always wanted to be a mother. She had always wanted kids. Leanne was actually described as being very, very good with children, which is probably why she worked as a teacher's aide. That's what she did. Leanne's father, Garland, said of his daughter, quote, my daughter was a Christian. I mean, a Christian on top of a Christian, and trying to keep her son away from drugs. Not quite sure what the context with that is, but yeah, he was just pretty much talking about just how much Leanne cared for her children, how much she looked out for them, and how she just wanted the best for her kids, right? Any decent parent wants that, right? And it seemed like the Mangrums were, just your quintessential, typical Southern American family. Terry Jr. played football, Alicia was a cheerleader, and it is said the first, 6, 7, 8 years of the Mangrums' marriage was, really, really good. They were a happy family, and they were, making their lives. However, as the years went on, cracks did unfortunately begin to appear in the relationship, in the marriage. So apparently, whatever Terry Sr. did exactly for his family's company, whatever it was, required him to work long hours and required him to travel quite often. And this presented some problems as the marriage went on. And finally, in 1999, Terry Sr. and Leanne divorced. After the divorce, Leanne moved her and her children to Nashville. Said that she, wanted to get a fresh start. However, Alicia and Terry Jr., they were not happy with the move, which I can imagine. You're a kid, you've got, all your friends and all your life back there. And they were just having a really difficult time making it work in Nashville. And so, because her children missed Dickson County so much, and because she is a good mother, Leanne reluctantly let her children go back to live with their father. Which, that right there, I feel like really just speaks volumes what a caring, devoted mother Leanne is, right? She did not want to be separated from her children. She reluctantly let them go. But she knew how much they missed their friends, right? And that's where they had established roots. And rather than, make her kids suffer and live in a place that, they weren't happy at, she decided to let them go live with their father, which, kudos to Leanne, man. So many parents just don't care what their kids want, especially when you're dealing with a divorce. Now, I don't know how long Leanne stayed in Nashville without her children, but she did stay for, some time trying to make it work, but she just couldn't. She missed her kids too much. Just missed them too much, and so she too moved back to Dickson County. Now, again, I'm not quite sure how long the children had now been living with their father in Dickson County. Not sure sure how long Leanne was in Nashville, but when Leanne does get back to Dixon County, she, wants to see her kids. She wants some visitation. I am not sure what the official custody arrangement was, if there was one. I'm not sure. But Leanne wanted to, see her kids, and Terry Sr. by that time had remarried. And he had remarried a woman named Kimberly Renee Gypsy Mangrum. Again, like with Leanne and Terry Sr., don't know a whole lot about Kimberly's upbringing, just that she was born July 6th, 1963 in North Carolina, and that's where she was born and raised. Not even exactly sure, where exactly in North Carolina. So yeah, when Leanne moves back, Terry Sr. is now married to Kimberly, and Terry Sr. and Kimberly are making it very difficult for Leanne to see her children. They are giving her a hard time. Now, I know Terry Sr. and Kimberly did end up having a child together. Don't know when, don't know the child's name. I don't even know the child's sex, if it was a son or daughter, not sure. Terry Jr. said that when Kimberly first came around and when his father first started dating her, at first, Kimberly, she worked overtime trying to gain his and his sister's affections, all right? Trying to win their good graces. But eventually, Kimberly's attitude towards her husband's children grew very disdainful. She had really, bad mood swings, just grew very controlling and jealous of the whole family, Terry Sr., Terry Jr., and Alicia. And yeah, her attitude just changed. I am curious to know if this attitude shift happened after she'd given birth to Terry Sr.'s child. You know how sometimes that can happen? It's almost like a cliche, honestly, right? Where the step-parent is all nice at first, but then as soon as they have a child with the parent who has existing kids, all of a sudden the pre-existing kids are a problem, or they're grow jealous or something. So I don't know if that's the situation we've got here. That's kind of what it sounded like. Without knowing nitty-gritty details, all we can do is speculate, right? But yeah, that's kind of what went through my mind when I came across those facts. Now, like I said, by the time Leanne moves back, Terry Sr. and Kimberly are giving her a hard time about seeing her own children. And it seems like custody and visitation of the children seemed to be a primary source of conflict between the three adults. It is said Terry Sr. and Kimberly actually harassed Leanne. And I don't know, all the reports I read, it kind of seemed like they were always the instigators. And yeah, the three were just constantly arguing. Garland, Leanne's father, he said that he did try to help his daughter, especially when she felt that she was being harassed by her ex-husband. He said one time he actually had paid a lawyer $1,500 to try and get some furniture back that Garland says that Terry Sr. and Kimberly, quote, tricked her out of. I don't know the situation there, but yeah, he was alleging that Terry Sr. and Kimberly had somehow, taken some of Leanne's furniture or something. But yeah, it was not a good time. There was a lot of fighting between these three. It seemed Kimberly was the main aggressor, just from what I could read on reports. She thought Leanne was an unfit mother, just really despised her, and just grew ever more controlling. At this time, I believe the children were spending weekdays with Leanne and weekends at Terry Sr. and Kimberly's, and Terry Sr. used to drop the kids off at Leanne's when they were done with their visitation, but Kimberly had grown so jealous and controlling, she now insisted on driving the kids to and from Leanne's. And of course, every time Kimberly did this, she used it as an opportunity to pick a fight with Leanne. Because Kimberly, as we will get into, she's trash, all right? She's trash. And as it turns out, Kimberly wasn't just being mean to Leanne and trying to get into fights with her. She was also abusing her stepchildren. Yeah, mentally and physically. Which, of course, is just kind of funny, right? You're so concerned with Leanne being an unfit mother, yet you sit here and abuse children, It's because, right, she doesn't care about the children. It's all about control. It's all about control with Kimberly. So Kimberly would threaten Terry Jr. and Alicia with knives. One time, she even burned Terry Jr. with some cigarettes. And another time, when Terry Jr. had been, late for school or something like that, Kimberly just, launched at him, threw him onto the couch, got on top of him, and tried to strangle him or cut him with a wire hanger. What the heck? I don't know what this chick's problem is, but she's just absolute trash. I mean, I don't get how you can abuse anyone, but I especially don't get how you can abuse children, man. You gotta be one pretty sick SOB. Terry Jr. also said that Leanne actually paddled him with like a wooden board when she felt he didn't obey her. Kimberly would always threaten her stepchildren too and say that she knew people from an old motorcycle gang that she used to run with. And she used to always warn her stepchildren that these bikers, they would totally come in the middle of the night and kill them if she wanted them to. So they better obey her. Yeah, this chick is such a skank. Like, I just don't understand why you would get some sort of sick pleasure from torturing children like that. Like, that's horrific. And again, I'm not sure about like the court situation going on at this point, but I know that Kimberly really wanted to make Leanne look like an unfit parent, all right? So she placed a call to CPS and told them that they should actually go inspect Leanne's house because they would find that she's an unfit mother. She doesn't even have like food in the house or anything like that. And for whatever reason, again, I don't know what else is going on here, but apparently CPS went and did an inspection on Leanne, and they showed up at her house, and yeah, she had no food in her fridge or in her pantries. But you want to know why? You want to know why, guys? Because Leanne had just gotten back from a vacation like that day, and Kimberly was aware of this fact. You know, she was aware of this, and of course, right, like anyone who goes away for any amount of time, you try to get all your food out of the fridge and stuff, right? So it doesn't go bad. And yeah, that is why Leanne did not have like food that she would normally have in her fridge because she had been gone. And apparently Kimberly knew this. So again, I don't know if there was like some sort of like ongoing custody battle going on. I'm not sure because it's just so funny, right? Like we've covered cases where like CPS should have done legitimate inspections and that never happens. But in this case, they do an inspection. So I don't know what else is going on. I'm not sure. All I know is CPS did inspect Leanne's home, found that she had no food, and yeah, they agreed with Kimberly, decided that Leanne was an unfit mother, and then decided to grant primary custody to Terry Sr. and Kimberly based on this. Yeah, isn't that incredible? So again, not sure what's going on, if they were in the middle of like a custody battle at this time or what, but yeah, isn't that messed up? And after Kimberly and Terry Sr. get primary custody, oh boy, it is said that the abuse really ramped up on Terry Jr. and Alicia. Apparently, Kimberly would force both of the children to call Leanne and tell her what a horrible mother she was, how much they hated her, how much they didn't want to live with her. Kimberly would force them to do this. Can you believe that? Isn't that sick? Kimberly would constantly disparage and just talk all kinds of smack about Leanne in front of Terry Jr. and Alicia, just even when they weren't around. Like that's all, it seemed like that's all Kimberly talked about was just how much Leanne sucked and how much she hated her. She even went so far as threatening to kill Leanne. She absolutely hated her, dude. Leanne lived rent-free in Kimberly's mind. It seemed that she was very jealous and bitter. And I wonder if she was like jealous and bitter that Leanne had given birth to Terry Sr.'s children first. I don't know, man. I don't know what this chick's problem is, but she is a see you next Tuesday, to put it mildly. Now, there was a neighbor who lived across the street from the Mangrums, and his name was Ronald Durham. And he noticed a change in the family's behavior after Terry Sr. had got with Kimberly. He said after Terry Sr. and Kimberly had gotten married, he saw Terry with his children less and less. Before this, he would always see Terry Sr. and the two kids out and about, just, doing stuff in the yard, just, hanging out. And after Kimberly entered the picture, he noticed he didn't see that quite as often. And whenever he did see the children, they were always accompanied by Kimberly. And he said Kimberly was just always yelling, always in a snotty mood, and was just a real biatch all the time whenever he saw them. Even Ronald could see that she had just complete control over this entire family, dude. Now, about a week before the events of today's case, Leanne got to spend some time with her father, Garland, and they went to his cabin at Hidden Valley Lakes, and they went fishing and just had a nice, father-daughter trip. And it's good that it was like a good trip, because this unfortunately would be the last time Garland would see his daughter. At least they got to have some nice last memories together. And right before the events of today's case, in very early September of 2002, Leanne had decided she was going to fight for custody, and she was going to take Terry Sr. and Kimberly to court, and she had actually filed the paperwork. And of course, as such, when she filed the paperwork and stuff, of course, Terry Sr. and Kimberly were notified, right, via paperwork, and oh boy, Kimberly was PO'd. She was very, very angry. Yeah, how dare Leanne try to fight for custody for her own children, right? So let's go to Saturday night, September 7th, 2002. Leanne is 34 years old, and she decided to spend her Saturday night, drinking, hanging out with some friends, and going to a bar to watch the football game. That's how she spent her Saturday night. She went to a Bellevue sports bar, hung out with her pals, and then sometime between 9 and 9:30 p.m., Leanne called her mother off of a friend's cell phone. Think hers might have been dead or something. Leanne and Betty, her mother, they made plans to attend church together the next morning. And then Leanne said goodbye to her mother, and this would actually be the last time Betty spoke with her daughter. Leanne hung out some more, and she ended up leaving the bar sometime between 11:30 and midnight. And she headed home. Now, I actually read one source that said this date, September 7th, was actually the day that Terry Sr. and Kimberly had gotten the paperwork notifying them that Leanne was going to take them to court and fight for custody. Apparently, they were going to go to court in the following week, and a judge was going to rule. Meanwhile, as Leanne was, wrapping up at the bar, getting ready to head home, Kimberly, who was 39 years old at this point, she got out of bed, leaving Terry Sr. asleep. She grabbed a bat, woke up 15-year-old Terry Jr. and 10-year-old Alicia. Kimberly told them that they were going to leave with her, and so the three all got into her car, which was a black Ford Mustang. Kimberly drove around for a little bit. She stopped by a convenience store to buy some cigarettes. And then, as she was driving, she made Terry Jr. and Alicia put on some gloves, telling them that they had one more stop to make. So she drove them by Leanne's trailer, but Leanne was not home at this point. And so Kimberly was, circling around to head back when Leanne in her red Jeep Cherokee passed by them. So Kimberly quickly turned around and started following her. Now, as Leanne pulled up into her driveway/yard, Kimberly quickly put her car in park, grabbed a bat, leapt out of her car, and started screaming and berating Leanne, hitting her car with the bat. Leanne rolled up her windows and locked her doors, but that didn't matter. Kimberly just started smashing the windows. She yelled at Terry Jr. and Alicia to get out of the car and help, and she smashed Leanne's front passenger window. Leanne tried to drive away, but Kimberly was too fast. She quickly bashed in the driver's side window, yanked Leanne out of her car by her hair before Leanne could take off. That's how fast and furious this attack of Kimberly's was. And as soon as Kimberly had Leanne outside the car, she just started pummeling her with the bat. Just pummeling her. She wailed on Leanne until Leanne became unconscious. And then, seeing a huge chunk of wood nearby, Kimberly then ordered Terry Jr. to grab the wood and hit his unconscious mother with it. Terry Jr. would later say that he did not want to assault his mother at all, but he was so afraid of Kimberly and she was just yelling and screaming at him that he did. He said that she, quote, made me hit her. Terry Jr. struck his unconscious mother twice with the wood, and I read some sources that allege that Kimberly actually held a knife on Terry as he hit his mother with the wood to get him to comply. And other sources said that she had threatened to, cut Alicia if Terry Jr. didn't do what she wanted. Kimberly then told Alicia to grab some rope that she had in her car, which she did, and Kimberly then ordered Terry Jr. to help her in tying up their unconscious mother. When he hesitated, she threatened him again and said that he would find himself, quote, in the same situation if he didn't help her. They ended up tying Leanne's hands behind her back, and then Kimberly forced both children to help her lift Leanne, who remember is unconscious, so that's a lot of dead weight, into Leanne's Jeep. They tossed her into the back of her Jeep. Kimberly then told Terry Jr. to drive his mother's Jeep and to follow her. I read some sources that said Alicia rode with Kimberly, and then other sources said that Alicia actually rode with her brother, so not sure who she rode with, but yeah, the three then left Leanne's home. They drove along, and eventually they ended up along a rocky dirt road, and they ended up parked beside Turnbull Creek, and this was near Interstate 40, near the Dixon-Williamson County line. Kimberly, Terry Jr., and Alicia then lifted Leanne, who was still unconscious, out of the Jeep and put her into the water. Kimberly then ordered ordered Alicia to go to her car and get a medicine bag. Inside this medicine bag was a bunch of prescription medication. When Alicia returned, Kimberly then forced both of her stepchildren to help her in shoving a bunch of pills down Leanne's throat. And it is said Kimberly massaged her throat to get her to swallow because again, Leanne was still unconscious. They then sort of pushed Leanne off into the water, and Kimberly threatened to kill her stepchildren, quote, in the same way or even worse, if they ever told what they had done. After a few minutes, Kimberly ordered Terry Jr. to go into the water and make sure that his mother was dead. Terry Jr., of course, hesitated. Kimberly threatened him yet again and then physically pushed him into the water, shoved him in there. And then Kimberly told Terry Jr. to step on Leanne's body and hold her underwater so that she drowned. Terry Jr. again hesitated. He didn't want to do this, but once again, Kimberly threatened him. I think she threatened Alicia as well. And so, under the threat of Kimberly, Terry Jr. then put his foot on his mother's body. I think some reports said that he stepped on her neck and held her underwater until she was drowned. Yeah. Kimberly then put Leanne's Jeep into neutral and rolled it into the water next to her body. And the three of them then left the crime scene. Along the way, Kimberly told Terry Jr. to remove his shirt and throw it, the rope, and a cell phone out the window. She kept telling her children to just keep their mouths shut. And as long as everyone just shut up and didn't say anything, everything would be okay. This whole thing would blow over, but everyone better keep their mouths shut. And I'm sure you're probably thinking oh my God, I can't believe how could the kids go along with this? But let's remember, dude, they're 10 and 15. I mean, I remember how I was at those ages. That would have scared me too, Kimberly then drove them back to Leanne's trailer. She told the stepchildren that she was going to go ransack Leanne's home and take whatever she wanted. And other reports said that she also had left the baseball bat there, so she also went there to retrieve that. She gave Terry Jr. a screwdriver and told him to pry open the door when they got to Leanne's home. When he was unsuccessful in doing this, she told him, just break the window with a screwdriver then, and lift your sister inside. And that is exactly what they did. And when Terry Jr. lifted his sister into the window that he had broken, he cut himself on some of the glass. Once Alicia was inside, she unlocked the door and let Kimberly and Terry Jr. in. And once she was inside, Kimberly just ransacked this place, guys. She broke furniture, she broke pictures, she trashed the place. Yeah, and on top of that, she made Terry Jr. and Alicia help her ransack Leanne's home, and she ended up taking about 4 garbage bags full of Leanne's stuff that included clothes and jewelry and all kinds of stuff. And yeah, anything she didn't want, she just trashed. Yeah, can you believe this chick? By the way, can you believe she's almost 40 years old, guys? Can you believe this? This chick is such a hag. At 5:20 a.m., so we're on the next day, September 8th, technically, they are still at Leanne's home, and Kimberly then makes Alicia call her grandmother, Leanne's mother. Some reports said that she made her call her from Leanne's home. Other reports said that they made her call her from Leanne's cell phone, but I thought she tossed her cell phone out the window. So I was a little unclear about that. But yeah, she did make Alicia phone her grandmother. And when a groggy, half asleep Betty answered the phone, Alicia was forced to say, quote, "Mama, please help me. I'm scared. Help me, I'm afraid." And then they hung up on her. Of course, Betty called right back, but got no answer. And so she called a neighbor of Leanne's. This neighbor was Agnes Sullivan. And she was like, "Hey, Agnes, can you look at your window? Is Leanne's car in front of her home?" Agnes checked and she's like, "No, it's not." So later on that day, after Kimberly, Terry Jr., and Alicia had left the crime scene, it's later on in the day now, Kimberly made her stepchildren help her clean down her vehicle. And I mean clean it, inside and out. Their neighbor, Ronald Durham, he actually saw the family doing this. And as they were washing the car and Kimberly was barking orders at them, she told them the story that they were going to tell police when they inevitably came knocking. Terry Sr., although he had been asleep during this whole incident, he got himself involved when he got rid of the baseball bat. So that same day, in the afternoon now, Agnes, she still didn't see Leanne's car in her driveway, so she decided to go over there and inspect Leanne's home herself. She let herself in because she had a spare key, and of course, she found it exactly as Kimberly and the kids had left it. Thrashed. She said it looked, quote, ransacked. Now, at around roughly the same time, all right, so roughly around as, Kimberly and the kids are washing the car and Agnes stumbles upon Leanne's trashed home, a local sawmill owner who had just finished church and was wrapping up fishing was walking alongside Turnbull Creek. Just another typical Sunday afternoon. However, as he rounded the corner, he came across the crime scene, came across Leanne's Jeep in the water, and came across her body floating right alongside it. He immediately summoned authorities. Now, once they arrived and had taken Leanne's body out of the water, they could see the multiple bruises, the multiple blunt force traumas that were all over her. Saw contusions and bruises on her head, her buttocks, her abdomen, her torso. Like, she looked really beat up, and we know why. Now, at first glance, authorities thought, maybe she got these injuries in the gnarly car crash that got her into the water. Like, maybe that's what killed her. Now, police were able to quickly identify Leanne through her vehicle registration, and authorities rushed to her home. Now, I'm unclear if Agnes had called Betty and told her what she had found, but I do think Agnes told authorities where Betty lived. Because police said when they got to Leanne's home, a neighbor told them where they could find Leanne's mother. And I think the police were able to 100% verify it was Leanne through Betty. So they went over to Betty's house, and Betty told authorities about the mysterious 5 a.m. phone call that she had gotten earlier that day, and she also gave authorities a key to her daughter's home. When police got back to Leanne's place and searched it, authorities, of course, found it ransacked, just like Agnes had found. They also found a cigarette butt besides a tree stump outside that had some lipstick on it, along with a drop of blood on the storm door, fingerprints on a shard of glass, and a palm print on another pane of glass. Now, after they verified that it was Leanne that they had, authorities' next stop was, of course, to Terry Sr., Kimberly, and the children. And when police knocked on their door and informed them, they, of course, acted completely shocked and heartbroken. So the police ended up knocking on the Mangrum's door on September 9th. Kimberly told them that the night Leanne died, she had actually stopped by their house. And while she had been there, a mysterious man had pulled up. Leanne told her that this man's name was Bob, and Leanne told authorities that he had dark, curly, quote, salt and pepper hair. Now, Kimberly said that she did not like Bob's vibe, and she just thought he was creepy. She told them, quote, "This guy's looking at me. I swear you thought the man was the devil." She said he, quote, looked evil. Yeah, you'd know all about evil, wouldn't you, Kimberly? She said, quote, "He gave me the heebie-jeebies." She described him as a built man, about 200 pounds, 6'2", and he drove a dark Mustang just like Kimberly's. And in fact, it was so similar. He actually had the same front license plate cover. It was a Harley Davidson license plate cover, and he had the same one that she had. The only difference was Bob's Mustang was a few years newer than hers. Kimberly said that Leanne had, stopped by their home that night. She was a little inebriated. She said Leanne had stopped by to get a Klonopin pill for her anxiety, which Kimberly gave to her. But she told detectives that she thought maybe Leanne had lifted the pill bottle from her when she came to visit because she couldn't find it after that. She also speculated that Leanne may have taken a, quote, back way home the night that she died. Terry Sr., Terry Jr., and Alicia all corroborated Leanne's stories when they were brought in for individual testimonies. Now, authorities set to work trying to track down this mysterious Bob, their only suspect. Betty had given them the number that Leanne had called her from the night at the bar. Remember, she had to use a friend's cell phone to call her mother when they made the church plans? Yeah, Betty had that number still in her caller ID until she gave it to authorities. Turns out the number belonged to a Robert Bob Smith. Authorities managed to track him down to his home in Nashville. Now, right off the bat, when authorities meet Robert Bob, things are off, all right? First of all, this guy looks nothing like what Kimberly described. His hair was not dark, was not salt and pepper, he was not 6'2", and he didn't drive a black Ford Mustang. He drove a truck. He told police that he had last seen Leanne that night at the bar when they had parted ways to go home, and that was the last time he had spoken to his friend. Now, authorities quickly realized that, this guy, not their guy. It's not who they're looking for. Not only did he not look like the mysterious Bob, they thought that he seemed like genuinely sad and grief-stricken that his friend had been killed. Like, he seemed legitimately in grief. So yeah, that was a swing and a miss. Not long after this, the autopsy results came back. And it came back and said that Leanne, of course, did not die from the blunt force trauma injuries that they had seen. Of course, as we know, right, she died from drowning. The autopsy also discovered there was some bleeding in her skull and verified that those injuries that they had observed on her, yeah, those were definitely created by a blunt instrument such as a baseball bat. And of course, this just heightened investigator senses even more. Now, authorities did look into another potential suspect. It was one of Leanne's friends named Elvis. Elvis had told police that he did drive by Leanne's home that night, but she hadn't been there. Now, Elvis told police that him and Leanne were just friends. However, Leanne's neighbors, friends, and family, they all said that Elvis wanted to be way more than that. Way more than that. He wanted to be more than just friends, and he was like obsessed with Leanne. But Leanne, she didn't seem that way, it was just her friend Elvis. Now, authorities really looked at him because during the interview, he really tried to downplay how much he liked Leanne. But it wasn't until he took a polygraph test and passed it that authorities finally backed away. So even though he was a good potential suspect, right? It just, no dice. So, in an attempt to get even more leads, investigators, they decided to stake out Leanne's funeral. You know how sometimes they'll do that, right? Just to kind of see if maybe anyone interesting shows up, see how people are reacting, just when they're trying to find some sort of leads here, right? So they're like, all right, let's stake out her funeral and see if we see anything interesting there. And right off the bat, they did notice something really, really strange. They noticed that Terry Sr., Kimberly, Terry Jr., and Alicia, they were not at the funeral. They were missing, and that immediately raised investigators' eyebrows. Even more suspicious is after the funeral, one of Leanne's brothers gave investigators a bunch of documents. They were divorce documents and court documents documenting everything between Leanne and Terry Sr. And there was also paperwork regarding the ongoing, custody battle that was ongoing. And after Leanne's brother gave him these documents, that is when investigators, they started looking at Terry Sr. and Kimberly. So they talked to that neighbor, Ronald Durham, and he told them about his observations about Kimberly, how she had control over the family, how she was just a mean, grumpy old hag all the time. And he also informed them about the heavy-duty, car washing and car detailing that Kimberly and the stepchildren had done. He said that, they were washing the car for hours. And, they were out there for so long, and it was so bizarre that he had actually gotten out his binoculars to get a closer look to see what they were doing, because it was very bizarre to him. So the fact that, they're sitting there washing Kimberly's car the day Leanne's body's discovered, and the fact that Kimberly was obviously lying about this Bob guy, all of this started getting investigators' attention. But they were still missing that crucial evidence they needed, right? They had hunches, and they had guesses, and they had their suspicions, but they still did not have that crucial piece of evidence they really needed, It would actually be a while before a break would actually come. So over a year later, on October 29th, 2003, the blood and prints found at Leanne's home, they finally came back from the lab. They had been analyzed, and it was determined that the blood they had found came back as a male relative of Leanne's. It was discovered the DNA on the cigarette butt contained female DNA, and the palm print they found was actually a perfect match for a known print that they had. In December of that year, police obtained DNA samples from Terry Sr. and Terry Jr., including finger and palm prints from each of them. I guess when Kimberly first heard that investigators wanted their DNA, she tried to take off, and she took the family to North Carolina for a month or something. But I don't know if she thought they would forget about her or what, but yeah, as soon as they returned, they got the DNA. And when the tests were ran, the drop of blood and the fingerprints, of course, came back as Terry Jr.'s, and the palm print had been identified as Alicia's. I'm not sure how her palm print was a known palm print. I know back in the day, didn't they have kids visiting police stations, and then wasn't part of that them printing the kids, and it turns out it was really so they could add them into the system or something like that? Was that that was a thing, right? Or was that just one of those stories you hear about that never really happened? But yeah, I thought that was weird that Alicia's palm print was already on file for them, and that was the only thing I could think of that would explain that. Now, it wasn't until February 11th, 2004 that the police were finally able to get Kimberly's DNA. And as as they were collecting it, they were also interviewing her, right? And in this interview, Kimberly again reiterated her story about Bob with the salt and pepper hair and reiterated everything, that he seemed menacing and that he had the exact same car as hers. She said her and the kids had been to Leanne's about 2 weeks before her murder, and the meeting was to discuss their family problems, the family situation they were dealing with. I thought it was kind of funny because it's like the only reason anyone's dealing with family problems is because of you, because you're a hag. And without any prompting, all right, without any prompting at all, Kimberly mentioned that she did smoke cigarettes while she was there at Leanne's, and they probably would contain her lipstick. After they collected Kimberly's DNA, they were able to verify that it was in fact her DNA on those cigarette butts. Now, it is said after authorities had gotten the DNA from her, Kimberly grew super paranoid. And so it was at that point, after they had collected her DNA, that she made Terry Jr. write a confession note. She made him date it February 4th, 2004, 2:03 a.m., and forced him to write, quote, "I, Terry W. Mangrum, admit to the murder of Leanne Mangrum Smith. She was my mother, if you want to call her that. I'm writing this because the TBI came and took the cigarette butt of my stepmother and a sample of her DNA." And the TBI stands for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Terry Jr. said that Kimberly held a knife to his side as he wrote this note out. And finally, on February 23rd, 2004, Terry Sr., Terry Jr., and Kimberly were all arrested. Now, I read Kimberly and Terry Jr. were arrested first, and Terry Sr. was arrested later that day. And I believe Kimberly may have been the first one to be arrested. Then, police went to Terry Jr.'s high school and arrested him there. Now, after obtaining a written waiver of his Fifth Amendment rights, they talked to Terry Jr. in a recorded interview. Terry Jr. said that he had taken Kimberly's car that night without her permission and driven to his mother's home. He said that he wanted to talk to her, and while they were there, he claimed that she flipped out and attacked him, and he had to kill her in self-defense. Other sources said that he told investigators that him and his mom had actually driven to the creek, and he had followed her, and then some accident ensued where she died, and so he staged the scene and put her car in the water to make it look like a car accident. Other sources said that he had followed his mother. They had driven to the creek, and then some accident ensued where she hit her head on a rock and died, and he panicked. So he had put her car in the water to make it look like a car accident or something. He also mentioned several times throughout the interview that he was aware he was a minor and therefore could face less time. Now, while the police didn't wholly believe Terry Jr.'s story, they did take him into custody right then and there, right? They did have his DNA, and now they do have the story. Even if they don't wholly believe it, they're like, well, we've got enough evidence that we know you were involved in some capacity, right? Now, when he had been arrested, Leanne's brother and Terry Jr.'s uncle, Daryl, he had some pretty harsh words for his nephew. He said that their family had always suspected foul play. Quote, "Nobody in this family of 200 members was surprised. Some may have been shocked, but not surprised." He said during their arraignment, he noticed that Terry Jr. had tears in his eyes and he was crying. And he said, quote, "There were tears in his eyes when he was before the judge, but he never said a word. I thought, it's an odd time to be crying now." Which I don't know, why is that an odd time to be crying, Daryl? He's a 15-year-old kid about to be arraigned on murder of his own mother. I don't know. I would think most 15-year-olds would be crying at that point. But yeah, they were pretty angry, so. District Attorney General Dan Brooks convened a Dixon County grand jury, and he wanted to charge the three of them with especially aggravated burglary, especially aggravated kidnapping, first-degree premeditated murder, and felony murder, for which the grand jury did return an indictment. Later that same day, the grand jury was reconvened and returned a superseding indictment charging Kimberly and Terry Sr. with each of the previous offenses just described, but added charges of criminal conspiracy to each of them. The next day, the 24th, after her arrest and being informed of her rights, Kimberly decided to talk. In a recorded interview, she denied being involved in Leanne's death, and she actually thought it was Terry Jr. who had done it. She believed that he had taken her car that night without her permission. She said she was aware of the DNA evidence against her, but she explained that, her and Terry Sr. had been there many times, and they had actually been there about 4 or 5 days before Leanne's murder. And she said she disposed of her cigarettes outside, saying, quote, "I was smoking that day. I'll go ahead and tell you that." She repeated that she gave Leanne the Klonopin pill that night, and even said Alicia had reported finding, quote, "something in her backpack." and it was related to her mother's murder. So of course, investigators then talked to Alicia. Now, at first, she repeated the rehearsed story that Kimberly had told her, but when police informed her that, like, hey, we know this story is bull, so what really happened? Alicia recanted her story and said that on the day of her mother's murder, her father and her brother had actually driven to Leanne's home that day, and they had driven in Kimberly's Mustang. She said upon the return, Terry Jr. admitted that he had killed their mother. He said that they had argued about the custody arrangement, and yeah, the argument turned deadly, and he killed her. Other sources said that Alicia told officers that she and Kimberly were actually home, and Terry Sr. and Terry Jr. just came into the room and announced that they had killed Leanne. Alicia said they had concocted the Bob story in order to protect her brother. Alicia then produced the note that Terry Jr. had been forced to write. Police then went back to Terry Jr., and I think this might be where he told them he either killed his mother at her home or, like, they had the accident and he staged it. That might be why there's, like, two different stories on what Terry Jr. told police. Either way, I read multiple sources that said after police had come back to him, told him that they didn't believe his story, Terry Jr. finally confessed. And he told officers what had really happened that night. Now, I don't know exactly when, but I know at some point, Terry Jr. and Alicia's grandparents actually hired them an attorney. I'm gonna guess it was probably Terry Sr.'s parents and not Leanne's. Now, all throughout his interrogation, Terry Sr., he remained adamant that he had nothing to do with his ex-wife's murder. All he would say is that he knew Kimberly and his kids went out that night. He said the next morning, Kimberly had mentioned to him that Leanne would no longer be a problem, and he just really tried to downplay and play dumb that he knew anything that happened that night. He was just trying to play just dumb. Now, as the, court case worked its way through the system, Terry Sr. and Kimberly's lawyers tried to get their bail amount reduced. Each of their bails had been set at $1 million, but on April 1st, 2004, Terry Sr.'s lawyer, Jack Lowry, he had successfully argued for a bail reduction for him. He pointed out his, quote, minimal criminal history, pointed out that Terry had strong ties to the community and he wasn't a flight risk, and he was not a risk to the public. And so as such, Terry Sr.'s bond was reduced to $100,000. And on April 2nd, he was released from jail while he awaited his trial. Kimberly's lawyer, Chris Young, also succeeded in getting her bail reduced. Hers also dropped to $100,000, even though Young had tried to drop it to $75,000. Yeah, he wasn't successful in that, but he did get it reduced to $100,000 just like Terry Sr. Now, apparently, Leanne's family was pretty upset at the bail reduction. Donna, one of her sisters, said, quote, "It seems like the justice system is protecting them more than they are for Leanne. I feel like she's been forgotten. They should have never, ever done that." Terry Jr. at this time was still awaiting his court date in juvenile hall, and he was also being evaluated. Terry Jr., unfortunately, would end up being charged with an adult due to the seriousness of the crime, and his bond was eventually set at $200,000. And I don't know when, but I know he too eventually posted bond and was out awaiting trial. Now, in December of that same year, 2004, the prosecution's office actually subpoenaed Alicia to testify before a grand jury. They were going to reconvene one so that they could hear what Alicia had to say. On advice of her attorney, Alicia refused to testify unless she was granted immunity, and the prosecution granted this. And in exchange, she would have to testify before the grand jury and testify at the upcoming trials. Kimberly's lawyer tried to block Alicia's testimony, and Alicia's lawyer joined them. Kimberly's defense was maintaining that the real reason prosecutors wanted to reconvene the grand jury was so that the state could investigate the pending charges. And thus, Alicia's testimony was actually an abuse of the grand jury process. They were pretty much arguing that the prosecution was using the grand jury as like a means to discover / investigate new evidence, Alicia's testimony, when the scope of a grand jury is to judge the evidence that has been brought forth thus far. At a hearing to argue over this, prosecutor Also Brooks was called as a witness, and he testified that he did not believe the Mangrum's family initial story about Bob, and he didn't believe that Leanne had visited the home that night. He did acknowledge that prior to Alicia's subpoena, he had met with her attorney, which had provided him with, quote, some different insight into the case. He knew that Alicia's testimony could be very crucial against Kimberly, and he said that he could have offered Alicia immunity at trial rather than, here at the grand jury hearing. But he claimed he was acting under the belief that Alicia's testimony might provide a basis to a grand jury to either add extra charges against Kimberly and Terry Sr. or issue charges against other individuals who had been involved, especially given the, quote, many twists and turns the case had taken. Also, Brooks maintained that the purpose of reconvening the grand jury was, quote, representing the case with the possibility of additional charges being placed and the possibility of adding defendants who the state might not know of at this point in time. He continued, quote, there have been other suspects in this case. Alicia should be able to tell us with an eyewitness account one of two things: what happened at the time her mother was murdered, or at the very minimum, if she didn't go to the scene, she'd be able to tell us before and afterwards who was involved. The grand jury foreman also testified, verifying that they had been reconvened to hear from Alicia so that they could assess, who was involved in all of this and to what extent. The foreman explained that this whole process thus far had been very difficult to unravel because this had been a family affair. Not to mention there had already been 3 versions of the story so far, right? The initial Bob story, the story that Terry Jr., possibly with the help of his father, had done it, and then whatever story Alicia was getting ready to tell. Quote, initially Terry Jr. was the one supposed to have been alleged to have done it, but during the time of this investigation, it was discovered that there were more persons involved. So we'd like to know how many and who they are. So yeah, basically just saying look man, we're just trying to get to the bottom of all this, alright? We've got all these different stories, we've got this entire family being involved now, and it's just been really hard to unravel, and so hopefully Alicia's testimony can shed some light on that. That was their argument. And in the end, the court allowed Alicia to testify before the reconvened grand jury, and the court said that there was no abuse of the grand jury process because the discovery of evidence, quote, was not the sole purpose of this subpoena. So after this decision, the grand jury was finally reconvened on January 20th, 2005. And this is when they would hear from Alicia, and she was now 14 years old at this time. She testified that despite some, quote, bad times with her mother, she had a good relationship with her. She said Leanne had hit her in the past and may have even sexually abused her. I was so confused on that when I read that in the article. Wait, what? I never heard any of this except for in Alicia's testimony. Alicia described her relationship with Kimberly as, quote, terrible, and she stated how her stepmother had subjected her and her brother to all kinds of abuse. She recounted how she'd been forced by Kimberly to call Leanne and her grandfather and say that she, quote, hated them and wished they would die. She asserted that her and her brother lived in absolute fear of Kimberly. They were deathly afraid of her. She reiterated how Kimberly would threaten to kill them if they didn't obey her. She said Kimberly would constantly call her mother a, quote, slut and a, quote, sex worker, except for she would use the derogatory term. And Alicia, interestingly, also testified that her father had absolutely no knowledge how Kimberly was treating her and her brother, which I thought was super interesting. What do you guys think? Do you think Terry Sr. was aware of what was going on? So Alicia recounted the events of that night, saying that Kimberly had woken her up and that she had, quote, gloves and stuff like that. She said her and her brother were forced to go with their stepmother, and when they found Leanne, she said Kimberly had forced them to put gloves on, and this was before she had gotten out and shattered Leanne's windows and just really beat her car. She reiterated, the scene that played out, and she said that when she had forced Terry Jr. to hit their mother with that piece of wood, that Leanne was smoking a cigarette. She recounted everything else that happened that night, and she said that when Kimberly told Terry Sr. about what she had done, he was pretty upset and he began to loudly argue with her. Alicia also said that roughly about a month after the murder, herself, Terry Jr., and Kimberly had actually thrown the bat into a creek, which was located near their home. Now, again, I read other sources that said that it was actually Terry Sr. who got rid of the bat, so not sure about that. And as a result of Alicia's testimony, the grand jury returned a second superseding indictment charging Kimberly and Terry Sr. with the same charges as the first superseding indictment, but they added a count of accessory after the fact for Terry Sr. Now, while awaiting trial, Kimberly, at some point, she too posted bond. Remember, Terry Sr. was out on bond, Terry Jr. was out on bond, and now Kimberly was out on bond. She had gotten a new attorney at this point, Jake Lockhart. But, get this, on March 21st, 2005, Kimberly failed to show up at a hearing regarding motions that had to do with her case. And I think jury selection was also to begin this day or like the day after. And it turns out, you know why Kimberly didn't show up? She had taken off. Yep, witch had just taken off. After evading authorities for a couple of weeks, she was added to the TBI's top 10 most wanted list, and she was added to this list on April 13th. Authorities believed that she was hiding out in the Fairview, Tennessee area or in the western hills of North Carolina where she had been born and raised. Kimberly's family was actually worried that she was going to try and kidnap her child. They had custody of her and Terry Sr.'s child, and they actually feared that Kimberly was going to come by and try to kidnap her child. Less than 48 hours after Kimberly had been added to the TBI's top 10 most wanted list, on April 15th, an anonymous tip led police to the Bowling Green, Kentucky area. The tip informed them that Kimberly could be found in this general vicinity, and it didn't take long for a patrol car to spot Kimberly's vehicle. It was parked at an Economy Inn hotel, and here, Kimberly was apprehended without much incident. At her trial, which began in August, the prosecution said that Kimberly was jealous of Leanne and jealous of the relationship she had with her children, and this provided her for the motive for the abuse and murder. Terry Jr., of course, testified for the prosecution. He confirmed the physical abuse that Kimberly had subjected him and his sister to, and he recounted the events of that night, asserting again that he had hit his unconscious mother and held her underwater under threat of Kimberly. He showed the jury how he and Kimberly had lifted his unconscious mother out of the Jeep and put her in the water. And this was despite Locker, remember Kimberly's lawyer, trying to implicate Terry Sr. as the one who had helped Terry Jr. move Leanne's body. Terry Jr. testified that Kimberly had concocted the whole Bob story, and she told them that they better stick to it or she too would kill them. He said he had written that confession note under threat of knife point, and he said Kimberly actually made him scratch out the name Mangrum on Leanne's name and put her maiden name Smith instead. When Terry Jr. was shown the recorded police interview he had done, where he'd claimed sole responsibility for his mother's death, he said he had lied under Kimberly's insistence. He said she threatened to kill him if he didn't confess. And she also told him that since he was a minor at the time, he would only spend a few years in prison, if that. It said Terry Jr. was extremely emotional during his testimony. Apparently it was pretty tough to get through. The defense, they attempted to get Alicia's testimony thrown out again, arguing the same thing, that the grand jury had been used as a way to discover new evidence. But that motion was denied. Alicia testified again, pretty much reiterating what she had at the grand jury hearing, and the defense received another blow when the tactic they wanted to bring up to counter Alicia's testimony was not allowed to be shown. So the defense had constructed a 177-pound dummy, and they constructed it because they wanted to use it to demonstrate how Kimberly just didn't have the strength to move Leanne's body, and there's no way she could have dragged her out of her vehicle, dragged her back into a vehicle, then back out and into water. They were saying that there's just no way. And what they wanted was for the jury to handle the dummy themselves and see how difficult it was to move it just on their own. However, the judge had ruled that they could not use this tactic and could not introduce the dummy at all because he said that the dummy did not fit Leanne's dimensions, didn't fit her weight or anything like that. So instead, the defense pushed back against Alicia's testimony by pointing out there was just no way she wouldn't have been all kinds of cut up if her brother had pushed her through the window like she was claiming. They were saying she would have had numerous scratches and stuff, and there would have been more than just her palm print found at the crime scene, right? And again, I'm wondering if they went that tactic because I think they were, again, trying to pin the blame on Terry Jr. doing it. I don't know if they were also arguing Terry Sr. helped him. The defense also argued that the presence of Terry Jr.'s blood at the crime scene, this pointed more to Terry Jr.'s original confession that he had done it. They also pushed back against the prosecution's assertion that Leanne had a great relationship with her children and described the relationship that she had as more, quote, acrimonious. They even tried to say that the children themselves may have gone over there to murder their mother. They even theorized that they may have gone over there to rob her that night. But, quote, things got out of control. I mean, yeah, pretty ridiculous. But again, right, that's their job as the defense, right, is try to counter with any other theory or motive or something like that. The defense also tried to downplay how afraid Terry Jr. was of his stepmother, saying that he often stole her prescription meds. I'm not sure how that proves he's, like, not scared of her. They maintained that not only did Terry Jr. kill his mother, but Terry Sr. and Alicia were actually conspiring to defend him. It also came out during testimony that the day after she had been killed, Kimberly told one of Leanne's brothers, not sure which one, that Leanne deserved to be dead a long time ago. Yeah, not sure the context, what brother it was or anything like that, but yeah, apparently that came out during testimony, which isn't that disgusting? I hate this broad so much. I hate her. The defense also pointed out that the only DNA evidence linking Kimberly to the crime scene were those cigarette butts. But in the end, on August 30th, 2005, after 10 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Kimberly of aggravated burglary, especially aggravated kidnapping, attempted first-degree premeditated murder, and felony murder. Her conviction for attempted first-degree premeditated murder was merged with her felony murder charge, and she was given life in prison for the first-degree felony murder charge, 25 years for especially aggravated kidnapping, and 6 years for the aggravated burglary. And all of her sentences were to be served concurrently. Kimberly filed an appeal in November of 2010 with the Court of Criminal Appeals of Tennessee at Nashville. She's trying to say that, again, Alicia's testimony shouldn't have been allowed and should have actually been stricken from her trial because Alicia's testimony had come by, quote, the state's misuse of the grand jury proceedings. Yeah, again, trying to argue this, but the court did not agree with her, and her appeal was denied a year later in November of 2011. She pleaded her case all the way to the Tennessee Supreme Court, arguing, again, the same thing, and once again, in March of 2013, her appeal was denied. She attempted to appeal yet again in August of 2016, again with the Court of Criminal Appeals of Tennessee at Nashville, but this time she claimed that she had ineffective counsel at trial. Now she was really trying to, home in on this one piece of DNA evidence they had, and was trying to really attack that, saying that, they had no way of knowing how long that cigarette butt had been there or anything like that, and that, there's no way they could have determined when she dropped it there because she often visited Leanne, and she often smoked outside and threw her cigarette butts outside. Yeah, of course, not only is she an abuser and just trash, of course she's a litterer as well. But the Court of Appeals, they didn't agree. And once again, they denied her appeal in November of that same year, 2016. And Kimberly's parole eligibility isn't until April 25th, 2060. Another source said that it was 2058, but whatever, as we know, not for a while. And Kimberly is currently serving her sentence at the Tennessee Prison for Women in Nashville. On December 12th, 2005, Terry Sr. pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact, and authorities ended up dismissing all the other charges against him. Yeah. He was eventually sentenced to 10 years behind bars, and he was released on March 17th, 2017. However, kind of weird, I read another source that said that Terry Sr. actually served no time behind bars, and actually served 1 year probation, so not sure why that's a conflicting report there, not sure. Terry Sr. and Kimberly divorced, I think during Kimberly's trial, possibly even before, but yeah, it was after they all had been caught and the jig was up, they got divorced. Terry Jr. ended up pleading guilty to second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 8 years behind bars. It was decided that after he had testified against his stepmother, that he shouldn't be charged with anything harsher than second-degree murder. And Terry Jr. was released January 4th, 2013. Alicia went and lived with her grandparents for a while. I'm not sure which ones. I'm gonna guess maybe Terry Sr.'s parents. And she eventually grew up and got married herself. And kind of on a sadder note, one of Leanne's sisters, Dana, she passed away in 2008. Leanne's father, Garland, he passed away in 2010. Her older brother, Daryl, passed away in 2013. And in 2017, Leanne's mother, Betty, finally passed away. Which, I thought that was kind of a bummer. A bunch of her family is gone. I just thought that was a bummer. And yeah, man, that was the tale of Kimberly Mangrum. The worst evil stepmother ever. And yeah, I'm totally curious to know what you guys think. Do you think Terry Sr. was aware of all this abuse going on? I feel I don't know, it's kind of weird when people say that they're not aware of stuff that happens in their own home. It's a little weird, right? Not totally unbelievable, but I don't know, what do you guys think? Do you think Terry Sr. was aware of all the abuse his children were suffering and that, he had married, an evil old hag? I don't know, I feel like he should. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. What do you think about about Terry Jr. only serving 8 years? I saw some people online talking about this case, and they were like, oh, well, he was 15. He should have known. He should have gotten, like, more time. I don't know, man. I remember being 15, and I don't know. Like, I could totally believe that he'd be scared of that evil old witch. Like, I don't know. Like, it doesn't really bother me that he got out in 8 years. I don't know. It just doesn't really bother me all that much. What about you? What do you guys think? What do you guys think? What do you guys think of this case in general? Like, should have just Kimberly gotten, like, life in prison? Or should have Terry Sr., Terry Jr.? What about Alicia? Do you guys think that she should have served any time? Totally curious to know what you guys think. Again, yeah, I tend to lean on the side, like, since they were, like, kids and scared, and I don't know how long Terry Sr. and Kimberly were together, but it had to have been long enough for her to, you know, manipulate and control them. And again, let's remember, dude, like, 15 and 10, like, come on. Like, I know that's, like, older as far as, like, kids go, but come on, dude, you're still so young and impressionable, and you're still at that age where parents have that, like, authority, right? I don't know. I'm super curious to know what you guys think. Please tell me what you think about this case. And yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and leave off with that. Next week, oh boy, we've got another big meaty case. I have got another two-parter. I don't know if you guys hate me for those, but this case, man, I came across, and wow, I just, like, I think I was just as hooked as, like, the Candy Montgomery case when I came across. Like, I was just floored. There's just, man, I'm very anxious to talk about that one with you guys, and I'm super anxious to know what you guys think about that one. But yeah, right now, tell me what you think about this case. Isn't this wild? Why do you think Kimberly had such a hate on for Leanne? Do you think she was just like, do you think she was the cliche, you know, that, like, oh, the ex-wife and already, like, gave him, like, kids and stuff? Like, do you think it was, like, along that line? Or, yeah, do you think she was just, I don't know, just an evil old hag? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad that she's rotting in prison. Like, screw her. Screw Kimberly Mangrum. She's a POS, dude. Like, she's the biggest see you next Tuesday. All right? And, like, the worst stepmother ever. Alrighty, y'all. I will wrap it up and let you go until we meet again next week. I hope, you know, take care of yourself out there. Stay safe. And remember, don't be a see you next Tuesday like Kimberly here. All right? Like, just be a decent, good person. Don't be a Kimberly, all right? You don't want to be a Kimberly. Maybe that can be our new Karen. Alrighty, y'all. That'll do it for Crime Dive. I will see you all next week. Bye-bye.